I woke to the sound of the front door opening, the familiar creak of its hinges cutting through the dull ache in my spine. For a moment, relief washed over me. Denise was here. Mondays were her days. Vital signs wound check, small reminders that my body was still mine, even if it couldn't carry me where I wanted to go. I tried to shift, to push myself higher against the pillows, but the pain flared and pinned me back. My legs felt heavy, uncooperative. The accident had been 3 weeks ago, a collision on Interstate 70 that left my lower back unstable and my right leg weak. Temporary, the doctors said, but temporary still meant helpless. From my bedroom, I heard voices near the front door. "Good morning," Denise said. Calm, professional, the sound of someone who expected to be let in. "Oh, she's fine today," my sister Brooke replied, bright and easy. "Really, she didn't sleep well and needs rest. You don't have to come in." I opened my mouth to call out, but my throat was dry, my voice thin. The medication made everything slower, thoughts, reactions, the space between deciding to move and actually moving. There was a pause. Denise hesitated. I imagined her clipboard tucked under her arm, the small crease between her brows when something didn't sit right. "If you're sure," she said. "I am," Brooke answered. "I'm her caregiver." The door closed. The sound landed heavier than the crash that had put me in this bed. The house went quiet in a way that felt wrong, like the air had been pulled out of it. A moment later, Brooke appeared in my doorway. She was smiling, the same smile she used when she wanted things to seem settled, reasonable. She had always been good at that, making decisions sound like favors. "You're awake," she said lightly. "Good. I told the nurse you were fine. You don't need strangers fussing over you." I tried again to speak, to explain that I did need her, that I couldn't get to the bathroom safely on my own, yet that my legs still buckled without warning. What came out was a weak sound that barely crossed the room. Brooke glanced at my phone on the bedside table, then picked it up and set it on the dresser just beyond my reach. "You've been obsessing," she said. "It's not healthy. I'll bring it back later." She turned the water glass away from the edge, straightened the blanket, all the gestures of care. Then she closed the door behind her. I heard the click of the lock. For a few seconds, I told myself it was for safety. That's what she would say if anyone asked. But as the minutes stretched, fear crept in, not sharp, not dramatic, just steady and cold. I couldn't stand without help. I couldn't reach my phone. If something went wrong, no one would hear me. Through the wall, I heard Brooke's voice again, lower now on the phone. I couldn't make out every word, but one sentence came through clearly. "We're on schedule?" I lay there staring at the ceiling, understanding something I hadn't wanted to see before. Denise hadn't just been turned away, I had been. By Monday afternoon, the house had settled into a quiet that felt deliberate. Brooke moved through it with purpose, opening and closing doors, answering calls, deciding what happened next. I stayed where I was, listening, measuring time, by the dull ache in my back and the slow return of thirst. When my parents came home from work, Brooke met them in the kitchen. I could hear their voices drifting down the hall, low, familiar, comfortable. The kind of conversation people have when they believe everything is under control. "She's been anxious," Brooke said. "You know how she gets when she's tired. The nurse wasn't necessary today." My mother, Patricia, sighed the way she always did when tension threatened her sense of order. "Well, if you're with her, I'm sure it's fine." My father, Glenn, murmured something about how lucky I was to have a sister willing to rearrange her life like this. I closed my eyes. None of that surprised me. Brooke had always been the one they trusted. She had a way of sounding certain even when she was wrong, and people leaned towards certainty when they were afraid. Growing up, Brooke was the easy one, charming, emotional, in ways that drew sympathy instead of concern. When she made mistakes, they were explained away as phases. When I succeeded, it was treated as expected. I learned early how to be capable, how to handle things myself, how not to ask for too much. After the accident, when I couldn't drive or climb stairs without help, Brooke stepped in smoothly. She called it temporary. She told everyone she was just helping me get back on my feet. My parents were relieved. They didn't have to choose sides or make hard decisions. Brooke took that weight from them, and they thanked her for it. That afternoon, Brooke came into my room carrying a tray. Soup, crackers, a glass of water, placed carefully within reach. The phone stayed on the dresser. "You should eat," she said. "You need your strength." I nodded because arguing took energy I didn't have. As I ate, I watched her straighten the small table by my bed stack. Papers neatly adjust the blinds. Everything looked orderly, controlled. "Mom asked if the nurse is coming back tomorrow," she added casually. I hesitated. "She's scheduled for Mondays and Thursdays." Brooke waved a hand. "We'll see." "It depends on how you're doing." Later, when she left to take a call, I noticed my rehab binder was gone. It had been on the chair by the window that morning, the one place I could reach it myself. Now the chair was empty. When Brooke returned, I asked her about it. "Oh," she said too quickly, "I moved it. You don't need to track every detail right now. That stuff just stresses you out." I wanted to tell her that those details were how I kept myself grounded. That knowing my schedule, my progress, my next appointment reminded me this was temporary. Instead, I swallowed the words. From the hallway, I heard my parents laughing softly at something Brooke said. A sound full of ease and trust. Lying there, I felt the shape of something I had known my whole life, but never named. When Brooke spoke, people listened. When I raised concerns, they became worries to manage emotions to smooth over. As the light faded outside my window, I stared at the empty chair where my binder should have been and understood that what I was losing wasn't just access to a nurse. It was my voice. Tuesday morning came quietly. No nurse, no knock at the door. Just the low hum of the house waking up around me, cabinets opening, coffee brewing. Brooke moving with the confidence of someone who assumed she would not be questioned. My back was stiff, my legs slow to respond as I tried to sit up. The pain was manageable, but only if I moved carefully. I reached for my phone out of habit, then remembered where it was. The dresser, still out of reach. When Brooke came in, she was already dressed, hair pulled back neatly, a stack of papers tucked under her arm. "I printed some things for you," she said, placing the stack on the bed. Appointments, medication list, rehab notes, everything you asked for. I flipped through them slowly. The pages were familiar, reassuring at first glance. Dates, dosages, physical therapy milestones. It all looked thorough, almost thoughtful. Almost. "The nurse schedule isn't here," I said. Brooke didn't miss a beat. "You don't need that right now." "I do," he said, more firmly than I felt. "It helps me keep track." She smiled the same patient smile. "That's exactly why I left it out. You're not supposed to be managing things. You're supposed to be healing." I let the pages fall back into place. Something about the neatness bothered me, the way everything fit too well. Later that morning, while Brooke was on a call in the hallway, I tried again to reach out. I asked her if I could call my insurance adjuster just to check on the status of my short-term disability claim. It was a routine thing, something I had handled myself before the accident. "I already talked to them," she said, covering the phone receiver with her hand. "You don't need to worry about money. I still want to hear it from them," I said. Brooke's jaw tightened for just a second. "You're exhausted. We can do that later." When she left the room, I noticed an envelope half hidden under her purse on the chair by the door. My name was printed on the front. It was already open. That afternoon, the phone on the dresser buzzed. Brooke glanced at it before I could speak. "It's the nurse," she said casually, then answered. She put it on speaker without asking me. "Hi, this is Denise," the voice said. "I was following up about yesterday's visit." "Oh, she slept through it," Brooke replied. "She's been really out of it." There was a pause. "Not long, but enough." "I'd still like to check in with her directly," Denise said. She's resting, Brooke said quickly. I'll let her know you called. The call ended. Brooke set the phone back down and turned to me. See, she said. Everything's handled. I stared at the ceiling, replaying the exchange. Denise hadn't sounded convinced, and Brooke had answered too fast, like she was practiced at it. That evening, as the house settled again, I heard Brooke's voice through the thin wall. She was on the phone pacing. Her tone was different now, tight, irritated. I told you I'm listed as her caregiver, she said. Yes, here. That's where the checks should go. I held my breath, afraid even that sound might carry. Brooke laughed softly, a sound with no warmth in it. She doesn't need to know every detail. When the call ended, I lay there in the dark, staring at the outline of the dresser, the missing binder, the phone I couldn't reach. Nothing I had heard was proof. Not yet. But it was something else, something solid enough to make my stomach knot. For the first time, the thought took shape clearly in my mind. Brooke wasn't just managing my recovery. She was managing me. Wednesday arrived with a sense of waiting built into it. I felt it before anything happened, a quiet pressure under my ribs. The knowledge that something was close, but not yet visible. Brooke was already on her second cup of coffee when I heard the knock at the front door. I knew who it was before she said anything. I'll get it, Brooke called out, her voice light, practiced. From my room, I listened to the exchange. Denise's voice was the same as always, steady, polite, unhurried. The kind of voice that didn't rush to fill silence. Good morning, she said. I'm here to see Marin. There was a pause. Short but real. She's still resting, Brooke replied. She had a rough night, I understand, Denise said. But I need to see her in person today. I held my breath. My fingers curled into the blanket, gripping it as if that could anchor me to the moment. Brooke laughed softly. You really don't. I'm with her all day. I can answer any questions you have. Another pause. Longer this time. I'm required to visually assess my patient, Denise said. Her tone hadn't changed, but something in it had sharpened, especially when there's limited mobility involved. I told you, Brooke said, a little firmer now. She's fine. From the sound of it, Brooke had shifted to block the hallway. I imagined her stance, one hand on her hip, the other resting casually against the wall. She had always been good at occupying space. I need to confirm that myself, Denise said. It's policy. Silence stretched between them. My heart thudded hard enough that I could feel it in my throat. Finally, Brooke spoke again. I don't want her stressed. She gets confused when too many people are involved. I'll note that you're refusing access, Denise said calmly. And I'll contact my supervisor. Something flickered in Brooke's voice then. Not anger exactly, more like irritation. Do what you need to do, she said. We're done here. The door closed. I stared at the ceiling, the familiar pattern of tiny cracks blurring as my eyes filled. Denise hadn't seen me, but she hadn't left quietly either. Brooke came into my room minutes later. Her smile was still there, but it was tighter now, pulled thin at the edges. She's being dramatic, Brooke said. Some people can't stand not being needed. I didn't answer. I was listening to the way her footsteps moved back and forth faster than before. She asked a lot of questions, Brooke continued. About your meds, your mobility, whether you can call for help. She watched my face closely as she said it, waiting for something, fear maybe, or guilt. I told her everything was under control, she added. That afternoon, Brooke was on the phone more than usual. She stepped outside twice, lowered her voice, paced the driveway. When she came back in, she shut doors harder than necessary. At one point, she passed my room and muttered almost to herself, "That nurse is going to be a problem." The words stayed with me long after the house quieted again. Denise hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't accused anyone of anything. She had just asked to see me and refused to let it go. For the first time since the door had closed on Monday, I felt something shift. Not safety, not relief, but the sense that someone else had noticed the wrongness. As the light faded outside my window, I lay still, aware of every sound, every creak of the house. Whatever Brooke was trying to contain was no longer contained, and she knew it. Thursday morning arrived with a clarity that felt almost cruel. The pain in my back had eased just enough to remind me what it felt like to think clearly, and with that clarity came a certainty I could no longer ignore. If I stayed silent, nothing would change. If I waited for someone to notice on their own, Brooke would keep deciding my life for me. I watched the light move slowly across the wall, measuring time by it, waiting for the sound of Brooke's car pulling out of the driveway. When it finally did, I felt my chest tighten. This was the window I had been waiting for. On the bedside table, tucked beneath a paperback I hadn't touched in days, was an old laptop Brooke hadn't bothered to take away. It was slow, the battery unreliable, but it still worked. I pulled it toward me, inch by inch, careful not to jolt my leg, my hands shaking with more than pain. I didn't have the strength to compose anything polished. I didn't have the luxury of choosing the right words. I found the number for the home health agency on an old email still logged in on the browser. My fingers hovered over the keys, then pressed record instead. "My name is Marin Hale," I said, my voice thin and uneven. "I'm a patient assigned to Denise Rios. She was turned away from my home on Monday. I can't reach my phone. I'm dependent right now, and I'm scared." I paused to breathe. "I'm not okay," I added, "and I need someone to know that." The moment the message sent, I felt something settle in my chest. Not relief, something heavier, something final. The door opened behind me. Brooke stood there, keys still in her hand. Her face shifting as she took in the scene, the laptop, the open screen, my expression. For a second, she looked genuinely surprised. Then the surprise hardened into something else. "What did you do?" she asked quietly. I didn't answer. I couldn't. She crossed the room in 3 quick steps and slammed the laptop shut. "You had no right," she said. "Do you have any idea what you've just done?" "You turned her away," I said. The words came out hoarse, but they were there. "You won't let me talk to anyone." Brooke laughed once, sharp and humorless. "I'm protecting you. You're not thinking straight." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "If you keep this up, people are going to think you can't make decisions for yourself. Doctors, social workers, courts." The word courts landed heavily between us. "You want that?" she asked. "You want strangers deciding everything." I shook my head, the movement small but deliberate. Brooke straightened, smoothing her shirt, regaining control, the way she always did. "Then we need to fix this," she said. "You're going to tell them you were confused, that the meds made you anxious." She took the laptop and carried it out of the room. I heard it click shut somewhere beyond my reach. That afternoon, my parents were called into the living room. Brooke explained that I'd had an episode, that the stress was getting to me, that I was making accusations that could cause trouble. I listened from my bed, the familiar weight of being spoken about instead of spoken to. No one came to ask me what I meant. By evening, the house felt tighter, the air heavier. Brooke checked on me more often, asked fewer questions. The door to my room stayed closed. Then, just before dusk, I heard my phone buzz from the dresser, a single vibration. Then another. Brooke wasn't in the room. I reached for it, my fingers barely brushing the edge before pain stopped me. I couldn't get to it in time, but I saw the name on the screen before it went dark. Home Health Services. I lay back against the pillows, my heart pounding, knowing something had shifted. I had crossed a line I couldn't uncross. Whatever happened next, silence was no longer an option. Friday came with no knock at the door and no clear answers. Just the sound of Brooke moving through the house, as if nothing had changed, as if the message I sent the day before had dissolved into the air, instead of landing where it was meant to. My back ached from staying too still. My leg tingled with the kind of numbness that made me careful about every movement. I shifted slowly, listening. Brooke was on the phone again, her voice low controlled. "Yes, she's fine," she said. "No, there's no emergency. She's just anxious." I stared at the ceiling and counted my breaths. Somewhere beyond this house, people were reading a report about me, or listening to my voice, or deciding which box to check next. I didn't know how fast those decisions moved. I only knew how slowly time passed when you were the one waiting. Late in the morning, Brooke came into my room holding a clipboard. Papers were clipped neatly at the top. "There are a few forms we need to take care of," she said. "Just routine things." She set the clipboard on my bed, angled so I could see the signature lines without easily reading the text above them. "This one lets me talk to your insurance directly," she continued. "This one is medical, just so doctors don't have to bother you with every little thing." I didn't touch the pen. "I want to read them." Brooke sighed, the sound heavy with patience. "Marin, this is exactly what I mean. You're making things harder than they need to be." "I want to read them," I repeated. For a moment she didn't move. Then she reached down, slid the clipboard away and straightened. "Fine," she said. "We'll do it later." Her eyes lingered on me a second too long. Not angry, assessing. That afternoon she moved me to the smaller guest room at the back of the house. She said it was quieter, better for rest. The bed was lower, the windows narrower. My phone charger didn't reach the outlet. "You'll be more comfortable here," she said, closing the door. Comfort felt like the wrong word. As the day wore on, my thoughts circled the same question. Had anyone listened, or had my message been filed away, scheduled for follow-up, marked non-urgent? In the early evening, the house went still. I heard Brooke's footsteps fade down the hall, then the sound of the television turning on. I lay there staring at the new ceiling, trying to will my body to cooperate if I needed it to. Then came a knock at the front door. My heart jumped so hard it hurt. I listened for voices, for footsteps, for any sign of who it might be. Brooke answered it quickly. "Yes," she said. A muffled reply, too quiet to make out. "Oh," Brooke said after a beat. "No, she's resting." Another pause. "No, everything's fine," Brooke continued. "There's no need to." The door closed. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Whatever that had been, it hadn't reached me. Later, Brooke came into my room to check on me. She adjusted my blanket, set a glass of water just out of reach again, and smiled. "You're safe," she said. "You just need to trust me." When she left, I turned my face toward the wall and felt the weight of the truth settle in. The system was moving. I could sense it like distant thunder, but it wasn't here yet. And until it was, I was still alone in this house, with the person who had the most to lose if I was believed. Saturday morning broke with the sound of tires on gravel. I heard it before I saw anything, the crunch outside the front window, sharp enough to pull me out of a shallow, restless sleep. For a moment, I told myself it was nothing, a delivery, a neighbor turning around. Then there was a knock. Not light, not hesitant, controlled, professional. Brooke was already moving down the hallway before I could gather my thoughts. I heard her straighten her voice as she opened the door. "Yes," she said. "Police department," a man replied. "We're here to do a welfare check." My heart kicked hard against my ribs. I lay still, staring at the ceiling, listening to every word. "There must be some mistake," Brooke said smoothly. "My sister is recovering from an accident. She's resting. We just need to see her," the officer said. Brooke laughed softly, the sound she used when she wanted to put people at ease. "She's been very emotional lately." "The medication, ma'am," the officer interrupted, calm but firm. "We need to see her." Footsteps followed. I heard my parents' bedroom door open, then their voices joining the conversation, confused and worried. "What's going on?" my mother asked. "Someone overreacted." Brooke answered quickly. "Everything is fine. The footsteps came closer. The door to my room opened. Light flooded in, brighter than it had felt in days. 2 officers stood in the doorway, one older, one younger. The older one took in the room in a single glance. The low bed, the repositioned furniture, the way my phone sat charging across the room instead of beside me. "Ms. Hale?" he asked. "Yes," I said. My voice shook, but it was there. He stepped closer. "Are you able to get up on your own now? Can you access your phone when you need help?" I hesitated, then shook my head. Behind him, Brooke spoke quickly. "She exaggerates. She's anxious." The officer held up a hand without looking at her. "Ma'am, I'm speaking to your sister." Something shifted in the room. My father went quiet. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. "I'm not okay," I said. The words felt small, but they landed. The nurse was turned away. "I haven't been able to talk to anyone on my own." The younger officer took notes. The older one asked a few more questions, all simple, all factual. Each answer felt like placing a stone on a scale that had been tipped for years. Brooke's composure cracked. "This is ridiculous," she said. "You're upsetting her." The officer turned to her then. "We'll need to speak with you separately." Her face drained of color. A few minutes later, a woman introduced herself quietly as a social services coordinator called in because of the report from the home health agency. She explained gently that they needed to assess whether I was safe where I was. Brooke started talking again faster now, about how much she had sacrificed, how hard caregiving was, how misunderstood she felt. My parents hovered torn, unsure where to stand. I watched it all from the bed, detached in a strange way. This wasn't victory, it was exposure. The officer told Brooke she needed to step out of the room. She hesitated, then did. The door closed behind her. For the first time all week, I was alone with people who were actually listening. "You did the right thing," the social worker said softly. I didn't answer. My hands were shaking too much. From the hallway, I heard Brooke's voice rise sharp with fear. "What are you doing? You can't just take over like this." I stared at the doorway, knowing something had changed, but not yet knowing what it would cost. The truth was finally in the room. And it wasn't leaving quietly. Sunday morning felt different, not because the house was quieter, but because I no longer belonged to it. I was still in my bed, still unable to stand without help. But the decisions were no longer being made over my head. A social worker named Elaine sat at the small desk in my room, her posture relaxed, her questions precise. She spoke the way people do when they expect answers to matter. "We're going to take this step by step," she said. "You don't need to convince anyone. We'll rely on records." That word stayed with me. Records. Brooke was in the living room with one of the officers, her voice rising and falling as she tried to explain, soften, to redirect. My parents hovered nearby, uncertain and quiet. No one was yelling, no one needed to. Elaine asked me about the nurse visits. I told her the days, Mondays and Thursdays. I told her when Denise had stopped being allowed inside. I told her where my phone had been placed, how often my documents went missing. Elaine nodded and wrote it all down. "We already have the visit logs from the home health agency," she said. "They document repeated refusals of access." I hadn't known that. A small, unexpected steadiness settled in my chest. Later that morning, an officer returned with a folder. Inside were printed call records from the agency time-stamped notes and a copy of the message I had left. My voice on the page looked fragile, but it was unmistakably real. "This helps," the officer said. "It establishes a pattern." They asked about finances next, carefully, respectfully. I told them what I could, that I hadn't spoken directly to my insurance adjuster since the accident, that my mail had been opened, that I'd been asked to sign forms I hadn't read. An hour later, the pieces began to line up. The insurance company confirmed changes to contact information that I hadn't authorized. My bank flagged recent access from a device I didn't recognize. Each confirmation landed quietly without drama, but together they formed something solid. Brooke's explanation started to shift. First, she said she was helping. Then she said she had permission. When asked to produce a signed power of attorney, she couldn't. The officer's tone changed, not louder, just narrower. "Ms. Hale," he said, "we're going to need you to step away from any caregiving duties, effective immediately." Brooke stared at him, stunned. "You can't do that," she said. "I'm her sister. That's exactly why we have to." Elaine replied gently. I watched from the bed as Brooke's authority drained away in inches. No shouting, no confrontation, just procedure. That afternoon, arrangements were made. Temporary placement. Medical oversight. Someone independent to manage my care until I could do it myself again. I wasn't being removed as punishment. I was being protected. As the officers prepared to leave, one of them turned back to me. "If there's anything else you remember," he said, "even if it feels small, let us know." I nodded. My mind was already moving differently now, scanning memories, not for pain, but for clarity. The door closed behind them, and the house fell silent in a new way. I wasn't safe yet, not fully, but the truth no longer depended on how convincingly I could tell my story. It existed on paper, in logs, in timestamps, and for the first time that felt like control. Monday arrived without ceremony, no dramatic knock, no raised voices, just a sequence of events that unfolded with a calm inevitability that felt heavier than anger ever could. I was no longer in my parents' house. By the next business day, arrangements had been finalized, and I had been moved to a short-term rehabilitation facility on the edge of St. Louis. The room was small but clean, the bed adjustable, the call button within reach. That alone felt like a quiet correction to everything that had gone wrong. In the late morning, an investigator came to speak with me. He introduced himself, simply asked if I was comfortable, then opened a folder that looked far too thick for something that had started as a single voice message. He went through it piece by piece. The Home Health Agency's incident report, Denise's visit logs, the timestamps showing repeated refusals of access, my insurance company's written confirmation that contact information had been changed without my authorization, the bank's notice of suspicious access tied to an address that wasn't mine. This establishes financial exploitation concerns, he said evenly. Combined with the neglect issues, it's enough to proceed. I listened numb in a way that surprised me. This wasn't vindication, it was documentation. That afternoon, Brooke was formally questioned. I wasn't present, but I heard enough afterward to understand how it went. At first, she denied everything. Then she minimized. Then she blamed stress, confusion, misunderstanding. When that didn't work, she shifted again, insisting she'd only acted in my best interest. The facts didn't bend. By evening, the decision had been made. Charges related to financial exploitation and unlawful restraint were being filed. A temporary protective order was issued. Brooke was instructed to have no contact with me. When the officer told me, his voice was careful, as if he expected relief. What I felt instead was a hollow stillness. Later, my parents came to see me. They looked smaller somehow, as if the certainty they'd leaned on for years had finally collapsed. My mother cried. My father stared at the floor. "We didn't know," my mother said. "She told us." "I know what she told you," I replied quietly. "I told you something different." Neither of them argued. There was nothing left to argue with. Before they left, my father asked hesitantly, "What happens now?" I thought about that for a moment. Now, I said, the truth stands on its own. That evening, a nurse came in to help me settle for the night. She checked my vitals, adjusted my pillow, and asked if I needed anything else. When she left, she did so without locking the door behind her. I lay there listening to the ordinary sounds of the facility. the distant cartwheels, a television murmuring somewhere down the hall, and felt the weight of what had happened finally settle into place. Brooke's carefully managed world had collapsed, not because I fought harder than she did, but because the lie couldn't survive contact with reality. Justice hadn't arrived with noise or spectacle. It came in paperwork and procedure and doors. That opened instead of closing. And though nothing felt healed yet, one thing was undeniable. She could no longer touch my life. 3 weeks later, I stood for the first time without fear of falling. It wasn't graceful. My right leg trembled, my balance wavered, and the physical therapist hovered close, ready to step in. But I stayed upright. That mattered more than how it looked. By then, the legal process had moved into a quieter phase. Brooke's charges were filed and pending. The protective order remained in place. There were court dates ahead, but the central truth was no longer in question. The system had decided that what happened to me was real, and that decision did not belong to my family. That distinction changed everything. I returned to work on a reduced schedule, logging in from my small apartment near the rehab facility. It wasn't the house I grew up in, and it wasn't temporary housing arranged by someone else. I signed the lease myself. I chose the place because the bathroom doorway was wide enough, the building had an elevator, and the windows faced east. Every decision felt deliberate, quiet, earned. My parents asked to see me once my discharge date approached. We met at a coffee shop, neutral ground, no walls heavy with history. They apologized without conditions this time. Not to undo what had happened, but to acknowledge it. I should have listened sooner, my mother said. Yes, I replied. I didn't soften it. I didn't need to. We agreed on boundaries that felt unfamiliar but necessary. Limited contact. No managing my affairs. No speaking for me. It wasn't punishment. It was reality. Healing, I learned, was not about restoring what had been broken. It was about building something that didn't require constant defense. The final paperwork arrived on a Thursday afternoon. Formal notice that Brooke was barred from any role in my care or finances indefinitely. The document was thin, clinical, almost anticlimactic. I read it once, then placed it in a folder with the rest of the records, logs, statements, timestamps. Proof not of what she had done, but of what I had survived. That evening, I sat alone in my apartment with the lights off, watching the city settle into night. I thought about the version of myself who lay in that bed weeks ago, staring at a locked door, afraid to make noise. She hadn't been weak. She had been isolated. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger had done its work and stepped aside. What remained was steadier than that. Ownership of my time, my body, my voice. Justice hadn't restored my family. It hadn't given me closure in the way people like to imagine. What it gave me was simpler and far more lasting. It gave me myself back. And that I understood now was enough. If this story resonated with you, I'd like to hear your thoughts. How do you define justice when it comes to family? And what does healing really look like after trust is broken? If you found meaning here, consider following along for more stories like this. And feel free to continue to the next one when you're ready.